Shunned by the pack for her appearance, she hides terrified, until the Alpha King makes a proposal. The forest was alive with whispers. Shadows moved like flowing water under the pale light of the moon, and the trees bent as if listening to some ancient secret. Among them she ran, silent, careful, always watching. Her name was Alara, though few dared to speak it aloud. To the pack that had once been her home, she was the marked one. Her eyes did not match, one pale as winter frost, the other deep and stormy like the night sky. Her hair, dark and tangled, carried the scent of the forest rather than the warmth of kin. She had learned to hide, learned that even the smallest hint of her presence could bring danger. Her pack had turned against her long ago, calling her a curse, a shadow of misfortune that would bring ruin to them all. She had tried to fight it, tried to plead her innocence, but their eyes had never softened. Words could not erase the fear etched in their faces. Alara now lived in the shadows of the Wolfen Kingdom, a land ruled by kings and bound by ancient pacts with supernatural forces. The wind carried stories of Lord Kalan, the Alpha King, whose command over wolves was unmatched, and whose presence could bend even the strongest hearts. To most, he was a figure of fear, a ruler who demanded loyalty through strength and strategy. But there were tales whispered in the wind that hinted at more, a heart scarred, haunted by loss, yet capable of seeing truth where others could not. She crouched beneath a gnarled oak, listening to the distant howl of wolves. Her heart raced. They were near her former pack, always searching for her. She had no intention of meeting them, not tonight, not ever. A sudden crack of a branch drew her attention. Alara froze. From the darkness emerged a figure, tall and regal, moving with an ease that made the forest itself seem to bend around him. Kalan. His eyes, sharp and golden, scanned the forest like a predator sensing prey, but there was no malice in them when they fell on her. Instead, a strange recognition lingered, a curiosity she could not name. "You hide well," he said, his voice calm, yet echoing like the wind through the mountains. "Most would have been caught by now." Alara shrank further into the shadows. I am not yours to find," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You should leave, go back to your kingdom." Kalan stepped closer, the moonlight glinting off the edge of his cloak. "And let your enemies take you? No, that I cannot allow." Fear pricked at her chest, but beneath it, a spark of something new flickered, curiosity. Why would he care? Why would the Alpha King himself, feared across the forests and valleys, care about someone who had been abandoned by her own pack? Alara's thoughts were interrupted by a howl, low, mournful, and warning all at once. Her pack was near. They were not friendly. They were not here to speak. They were hunting. Kalan's gaze shifted to the sound, calculating. "You have been running for far too long, child of the shadows. There is a better way, a way to survive, to exist, to have purpose." I have purpose," she murmured, "just not with them." Her voice broke, and she looked away, ashamed. Survival had cost her everything she once loved. Kalan studied her carefully, stepping closer. "Perhaps your purpose lies elsewhere, with me." The words struck her like a cold wind. With him, the idea was terrifying. The Alpha King, ruler of beasts and humans alike, offering her a path, a chance at something she had never imagined possible. Safety, recognition, power, all woven into a single, impossible proposal. Alara's chest tightened. Why me?" she asked. Her voice was barely audible. "I am nothing." Kalan smiled faintly, not cruelly, but with a weight that made her shiver. "Nothing," he repeated. "You are marked, yes, but marks are not always a curse. Sometimes they are a key, and you, Alara, carry something extraordinary. Something even your pack could not understand." She shook her head, backing away instinctively. I do not belong anywhere." "You belong somewhere," Kalan said softly. "You just do not know it yet." The howl grew louder, closer. Alara tensed, her mind racing. She had to make a choice. Run deeper into the forest and risk the pack, or accept whatever path this stranger offered, a path she could not fully trust. Kalan extended a hand, not commanding, not demanding, just offering. "Come with me. I will not harm you. I offer safety." "I offer a choice." Her mind screamed. Danger waited at every turn, yet the pull was undeniable. Something inside her, long buried under fear and rejection, yearned to believe, to hope, to step out of the shadows. Before she could answer, the underbrush rustled violently. Figures emerged, moving with the grace and menace of wolves, her pack. Eyes narrowed, teeth bared, voices growling with accusations and threats. "Alara," one of them hissed. "You dare show your face in our forest?" Fear slammed into her chest. She backed toward Kalen instinctively, the only anchor in a world that had never been kind. Kalen's hand dropped to his sword, not in attack, but in readiness. The golden light in his eyes burned brighter. "They will not take you tonight, not while I stand here." Alara stared at him, a mixture of awe and terror filling her. Could she trust him? Should she? Her heart hammered, and yet for the first time in years she felt a glimmer of safety. Not in hiding, not in running, but here with him. The pack circled, snarling, testing their courage against Kalen's calm authority. Yet no one dared step forward. Even the bravest among them sensed the difference in power, the difference in presence. Kalen's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Step back. She is under my protection." A pause, a growl. The pack hesitated, then slowly retreated, disappearing into the night as if swallowed by the forest itself. Alara sank to her knees, trembling. Relief, fear, confusion, all tangled together. Kalen extended his hand once more. "Do you understand now? You have a choice. You can continue to hide, or you can step forward and claim the path I offer." Her gaze lingered on him, the moonlight casting sharp shadows across his strong features. Something in her, something that had been starved for acknowledgement, quivered. She wanted to flee, but she also wanted more. Something she had never dared imagine, belonging. Finally, her voice came, low and uncertain. "And if I say yes, what happens next?" Kalen's smile was brief, secretive, yet not unkind. "Then you step into a world you have only glimpsed in your dreams and nightmares. You will face trials, you will face fear, but you will not face them alone. And you may discover what it means to be more than what they called you." Alara swallowed hard. Her hand hovered over his, uncertain. Her mind screamed with doubt, but the forest was quiet now. The pack was gone. And for the first time in her life, the night did not feel entirely hostile. Her fingers brushed his, a tentative connection, a spark of courage, a fragile, trembling hope. I will go," she whispered. Kalen nodded once, his gaze steady. "Then we begin. And Alara, do not look back." As they stepped into the deeper shadows of the forest together, a cold wind swept through the trees, carrying whispers of destiny. Somewhere far beyond the mountains, the kingdom stirred. A wolf howled, a storm gathered, and a tale of exile, courage, and unexpected bonds began to weave itself into legend. Alara's heart raced with fear and anticipation. The path ahead was uncertain, dark, full of trials, but for the first time she did not feel entirely alone. And the Alpha King, silent and watchful, walked beside her, knowing that this fragile, frightened girl might one day change the fate of kingdoms. The forest seemed to close around them, both protective and menacing, as if the night itself were holding its breath. Alara had made her choice, but the world she stepped into was far more dangerous than she could imagine. The fortress rose like a shadow over the forest, its jagged towers piercing the gray sky. Smoke curled from chimneys and flickered like ghostly fingers in the chill wind. For Alara, it felt both alien and terrifying. She had never seen such grandeur, nor imagined herself walking these halls, the Alpha King's chosen companion. Or so it felt in that moment. Kalen led her through the main gates, his steps confident and unhurried, his golden eyes alert to every movement. Alara's hands trembled. She tried to steady her breathing, telling herself it was only a fortress, only stone and wood, only guards and corridors. But every echo, every shadow seemed alive, as if watching her with quiet judgment. "You must understand," Kalen said, his voice low, steady. "This place is not like your forest. Here power rules, strength guides every action. And yet there is room for those who are patient and clever." Alara nodded, uncertain. I will try. I only want to survive." "Try, yes," Kalen replied, his gaze softening for a fraction of a moment. "But you must do more than survive if you wish to stand here. You must learn and you must choose." He stopped in front of a massive door carved with intricate runes. "Inside, you will begin your training. Some of it will be uncomfortable. Some of it will challenge what you believe about yourself, and some may frighten you." Alara swallowed. I am ready." Kalen's expression hardened slightly, and he pushed the door open. The room beyond was vast, with high ceilings and walls lined with ancient tomes and glowing sigils. Shadows danced on the stone as torches flickered in their sconces. In the center, a circle of runes glimmered faintly, pulsing like the heartbeat of the fortress itself. "This is where you begin," Kalen said. "Your mind, your body, and your spirit must all learn to bend, not to me, but to the power that flows through you." Alara stepped forward cautiously, her gaze fixed on the glowing symbols. She felt a tremor in her chest, part fear, part awe. For the first time in her life, someone believed she was capable of more than hiding and fleeing. "Do not touch anything until I tell you," Kalen warned, his voice echoing slightly in the vast room. Alara nodded, but her eyes wandered over the runes. They seemed almost alive, humming with energy she could feel even from a distance. She shivered. What was this power? And what did Kalen see in her that made him think she could control it? "Step closer," Kalen said finally, motioning toward the circle. "Feel the rhythm, breathe with it. Your body must learn first. Fear will try to control you, but you must not let it." Alara stepped into the circle, her bare feet brushing the cold stone. Energy tingled through her, light as wind, sharp as ice. She gasped, stepping back instinctively. Kalen's gaze met hers, steady and unwavering. "Control it," he said simply. "Do not fight it. Let it guide you, not dominate you." For hours, she moved within the circle, guided by Kalen's instructions. Sometimes she faltered. Sometimes fear threatened to overwhelm her. But Kalen was always there, calm and commanding, offering just enough guidance without stepping in. It was exhausting, frustrating, and strangely exhilarating. By the end of the day, her muscles ached, her mind swam, yet a new sense of possibility had taken root. For the first time, she felt powerful, not just hidden in the shadows, not just surviving, but truly capable. Days passed. She learned to control her senses, to move with stealth and precision, to draw energy from the runes that pulsed beneath the fortress. And all the while, Kalen watched. Not like a teacher, exactly, more like a guardian, sometimes stern, sometimes patient, always observing. One evening, after another long session, Alara sat in a quiet corner of the fortress, her legs pulled close to her chest. The moonlight streamed through a high window, painting silver lines across the stone floor. She could hear the distant howl of wolves beyond the walls, the same pack that had once shunned her. "You've improved," Kalen said quietly, standing beside her. "Faster than I expected." Alara blinked at him, surprised by the softness in his tone. "Thank you, I think I'm still afraid." Kalen crouched slightly to meet her gaze. "Fear is not weakness. It is proof that you are alive, that you care. Learn to walk with it, not against it." Alara looked down, twisting her fingers together. Something about the way he spoke made her heart ache with a strange mixture of longing and fear. She wanted to trust him completely, but a part of her still remembered the pain of rejection, the harsh words of the pack that had branded her cursed. Could she let herself belong here? Could she allow anyone to see her as more than the shadow they had always feared? "Do you ever get afraid?" she asked, almost whispering. Kalen's gaze darkened, memories shadowing his golden eyes. "All the time," he admitted, his voice low and rough. "Every day I face fear. I have lost people I could not save. I have failed, but fear does not stop me. It shapes me, and it can shape you, too, if you allow it." Alara's chest tightened. There was a weight in his words she could not name, a sadness that matched the loneliness she had carried all her life. She wanted to reach out, to understand, to comfort, but she did not. She had learned long ago that hope could hurt as much as fear. "Tomorrow you will face the first real test," Kalen continued. "The circle will challenge your body and your mind. If you pass, you will be ready for more. If not," his eyes held hers and she shivered, "then you will still survive, but you will know that your strength is only beginning." The next day, Alara entered the circle once more. This time it was not just the energy that pulsed beneath her feet. It was a presence, a force that seemed alive, watching her every move. Shadows twisted and danced, forming shapes that were almost wolves, almost phantoms, circling her. Her breath caught. She wanted to flee, but Kalen's voice echoed in her mind, "Do not fight it. Let it guide you." She moved carefully, trusting the rhythm of the circle, her body flowing with the energy instead of resisting it. For hours, she danced with the shadows, dodging, weaving, bending, and letting the power guide her. Sweat stung her eyes, her muscles screamed, and yet something inside her bloomed, a fierce, wild courage she had never known. When she finally stepped out, her body trembling and exhausted, Kalen's expression softened. "Well done," he said simply. "You have begun to understand. This power, it has been waiting for you, not to harm you, but to reveal you." Alara nodded, breathless, her heart racing. For the first time, she felt she belonged somewhere. Not in the shadows of fear, not in the cold rejection of the pack, but here, where she was seen, challenged, and yet protected. That night she lay awake in her small room within the fortress, listening to the wind outside. Kalen had left her alone, but the memory of his words lingered. "Do not fight it. Let it guide you." Could she truly trust this power? Could she trust him? The door creaked. Alara's heart leapt. Kalen stood there, his silhouette outlined by moonlight. "You do not have to face this alone," he said softly. "Even when you are afraid, you are not alone, remember that." She nodded, unable to speak. The room seemed colder now, yet not hostile, safe for the first time in years. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe in the possibility of trust, of friendship, of something more. But even as she closed her eyes, the shadows in the fortress seemed to stir, whispering secrets she could not yet understand. Tests were coming. Challenges that would push her beyond fear, beyond doubt, and perhaps beyond her own understanding of who she could be. And deep within her chest, a spark of hope glimmered, a spark that told her she had made the right choice. That she had stepped from the shadows, not into safety, but into possibility, into a life that could be hers if she were brave enough to claim it. As the night deepened, the wind carried a faint howl from the distant forest. Her pack, the ones who had cast her out. And though fear rose in her chest, it was tempered by the knowledge that she no longer faced it alone. Kalen was there, and for the first time she felt ready. The fortress, silent and vast, seemed to hum around her, as if acknowledging her presence, her choice, her courage. And somewhere deep in its stones, a secret waited, a challenge she could not yet see, a truth she would have to face. Alara's journey had only begun. Winter had settled over the Wolfen kingdom. Snow blanketed the forests, turning the world into a realm of white and shadow. The fortress stood tall against the cold, its walls etched with frost, and inside, Alara moved through the corridors with a careful, quiet determination. She had been training with Kalen for weeks now, learning to control the energy that pulsed within her. Every day she felt herself growing stronger, yet the shadows of her past still haunted her. She thought of the pack that had abandoned her. The faces that once belonged to family now filled her mind with bitterness and pain. She had run from them, hidden from them, yet part of her wondered what had become of them. Were they safe? Or had the fear of her mark consumed them as it had consumed her? Kalen found her in the library, sitting alone by the fire, her hands wrapped around a mug of steaming tea. He watched her silently for a moment, the golden light of the torches reflecting in his eyes. "You are quiet today," he said softly, breaking the silence. Alara glanced up, meeting his gaze. "I am thinking," she admitted. "About the pack, about who I am, about what this power means." Kalen nodded, understanding. "Your past shapes you," he said, "but it does not define you. You have more control than you realize if you are willing to face it." "I am afraid," Alara confessed, her voice trembling. "Afraid that I cannot undo the damage of the past, afraid that I will never belong anywhere." Kalen crouched beside her, his presence calm yet commanding. "Fear is natural, but courage is not the absence of fear. It is the choice to act despite it. You have that courage, Alara." "I see it every day." Her heart stirred at his words, a strange warmth mingling with the chill of her fear. For the first time she felt seen, not as the cursed one, not as the outcast, but as someone capable of more than she had ever believed. But the peace did not last. A messenger arrived from the northern woods, delivering urgent news. Alara's old pack had been struck by a mysterious curse, a dark force that twisted the minds of even the bravest wolves. The elders had fallen ill, and the young were lost to fear and chaos. The curse would spread if left unchecked, threatening not only her former pack but the entire kingdom. Alara's chest tightened. She had hidden for so long, protecting herself, surviving in the shadows. And now she realized that her past, no matter how painful, could not be ignored. Kalen placed a hand on her shoulder. "This is your chance," he said, his tone firm yet gentle. "Not to seek revenge, but to face the consequences of what has come before. You can help them or watch as their world crumbles." Alara nodded, determination mingling with fear. I will help them," she said. The journey north was treacherous. Snow fell thick and heavy, and the wind cut like a knife against their faces. Kalen and Alara traveled with a small group of loyal wolves, each step bringing them closer to the forest that had once been her home. The trees were silent and foreboding, their branches heavy with snow, casting long shadows that seemed to move as if alive. When they arrived, the scene was grim. Wolves wandered aimlessly, their eyes clouded with fear, growling at shadows that were not there. The elders lay weak and fevered, their breaths shallow. The curse was strong, a darkness that fed on fear and anger. Alara stepped forward, her heart pounding. She could feel the power within her, the energy she had been learning to control. But this was different. This was not a training circle. This was real. Lives depended on her. Kalen stood beside her, his gaze unwavering. "Trust yourself," he said. Trust the strength you have earned. Taking a deep breath, Alara closed her eyes and focused on the energy that flowed through her. She felt it pulse, strong and steady, guiding her hands as she moved among the afflicted wolves. She whispered words she did not fully understand, ancient words that resonated with the magic she carried in her blood. Slowly, the darkness began to recede, the clouded eyes clearing, the trembling bodies stilling. It was exhausting, every movement pulling from her strength, every moment a battle against fear. But Kalen remained at her side, his presence grounding her, reminding her that she was not alone. Hours passed before the last of the cursed wolves recovered. Alara sank to her knees, breathless and trembling, her body aching from the effort. She had done it. She had faced her past, and in doing so had begun to heal it. Kalen knelt beside her, placing a hand on her back. "You were remarkable," he said softly, "brave and strong. You have more power than you know and more courage than you realize." Alara looked at him, eyes wide. I didn't know I could do it. I thought I was weak." Kalen's golden gaze softened. "You are far from weak. Fear may visit you, doubt may shadow you, but your heart is strong, and it will guide you further than you imagine." For a long moment they simply sat together, the weight of the day settling around them like snow on the trees. Alara felt something stir within her, a sense of belonging, not just to the forest or the pack, but to something larger, something deeper. Kalen had not just protected her, he had seen her, and that recognition, it changed everything. The night fell and the cold pressed against the forest like a living thing. Alara and Kalen camped near the clearing, their fire flickering and casting dancing shadows across the snow. The wolves had settled, weary but healed, and for a brief moment the world seemed still. Alara could not sleep. She stared into the fire, her thoughts tangled with memories of rejection and fear, and the strange, growing feelings she had for Kalen. He was distant and commanding, yet patient and understanding. The contrast unsettled her, yet drew her in like the pull of a current she could not resist. Kalen broke the silence. "You are thinking of them," he said, his voice quiet, almost tender. Alara nodded, surprised that he could see so clearly. I do not know why I care so much. I left them, I hid, I survived, and yet I cannot ignore them now." "Because your heart is not closed," Kalen said simply. "You feel responsibility, yes, but also compassion. That is a rare strength." Alara turned to him, her breath fogging in the cold night air. "And you, do you ever feel compassion?" Kalen's gaze softened, a shadow passing over his golden eyes. "I do," he admitted. "Even for those I must sometimes punish or test, even for those I cannot save. Compassion is what keeps us human, even when power tempts us to forget." She studied him, the firelight reflecting in his eyes, seeing not just a king, but a man who had endured loss and solitude, who bore responsibility and pain like armor. The realization stirred something fragile and trembling within her. For all his strength, he was not invincible, and yet he was steady, reliable, a force she could trust. The next day, Alara led the wolves and Kalen back toward the fortress. Along the way, she reflected on what had happened. The curse had been strong, the fear almost overwhelming, but she had faced it. She had acted, not out of power alone, but out of compassion, courage, and connection. Kalen observed her silently, noting the subtle changes. She moved with more confidence, her posture taller, her steps surer. Yet in her eyes, he saw the lingering traces of doubt, the shadows of her past that would not fully release her. "You have done well," he said quietly after a long stretch of silence. "But there is more to learn, not just about power, but about yourself. The strength you wield is only a part of who you are. The rest lies in what you choose to protect and who you choose to trust." Alara absorbed his words, the weight of their meaning settling into her chest. Trust, that had always been the hardest lesson. To trust anyone, especially after years of rejection, was terrifying, and yet with Kalen it felt possible. As they approached the fortress, a chill wind swept through the trees, carrying the faint howl of wolves in the distance. Not her pack, these were strangers, perhaps scouts, perhaps shadows of the world beyond. But even as fear touched her heart, it no longer ruled her. She had faced the curse, faced her past, faced the darkness within herself, and she had emerged stronger. That night she stood at the edge of the fortress balcony, looking out over the snow-covered kingdom. Kalen joined her silently, his presence steady and comforting. "Do you ever wonder what might have been?" she asked softly, her voice barely above the wind. Kalen's gaze did not waver. "I do," he admitted, "but I have learned that the past cannot be changed. Only the present and the choices we make today shape the future." Alara nodded, feeling the truth of his words settle into her bones. She had been terrified, alone, abandoned. Yet here she was, standing at the edge of a new path, a new life, guided by someone who saw her not as a curse, but as a force to be reckoned with. The night deepened, and the fortress walls seemed to hum with quiet approval, as if acknowledging her courage, her growth, and the bond she shared with Kaelin. But even as she felt the stirrings of hope, a shadow lingered, a whisper in the wind, a faint echo from the distant forest. Something remained unresolved, something waited, and Alara knew that her journey was far from over. The past had been faced, the curse had been broken. But the trials ahead would test not only her strength, but her heart, and the choices she would make would shape the fate of the Wolfen Kingdom itself. The kingdom lay under a cold, gray sky, the snow covering the forests like a blanket of silence. But silence was a lie. The wind carried whispers of fear and challenge, and the distant howl of wolves carried a warning. The pack that had once rejected Alara was now at the brink of chaos again, and worse. The dark curse she thought broken lingered in the shadows, twisting and waiting. Alara stood at the fortress balcony, looking out over the snow-covered land. Her hands clenched at the railing. She was no longer the frightened girl who had hid in the forest shadows. Weeks of training with Kaelin, the trials she had faced, and the courage she had discovered within herself had transformed her. Yet doubt lingered. Could she face what was coming? Could she truly protect the ones she had once abandoned? Kaelin appeared silently at her side, his presence steady as the stones beneath her feet. "You are ready," he said, his voice calm, almost certain. "You have faced fear, you have faced yourself, and you have learned to trust your power. Now you will face your greatest challenge yet." Alara nodded, her breath forming a mist in the cold air. "I will not fail," she said, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her fear. Kaelin's golden eyes softened. "You may not be able to control everything," he admitted. "But you can choose to stand and to act. That choice is what makes you strong." Together they left the fortress, riding through the snow with their loyal wolves by their side. The journey north was treacherous. The winds whipped against their faces, snow blinding them at times. But Alara's heart was steadier than ever. She could feel the pulse of her power within her, the energy that had once terrified her now a steady, guiding force. When they arrived at the forest of her former pack, the scene was grim. Wolves wandered aimlessly, their eyes clouded with fear, growling at shadows that were not there. The elders lay weak, still recovering from the last curse, and the young trembled in the cold, lost to panic. Alara dismounted and stepped forward, her boots crunching in the snow. The wolves froze, sensing her presence, unsure whether to flee or attack. Her heart raced. This was her past, her home, and yet it felt foreign. She raised her hands slowly, letting her power radiate outward, not as a threat, but as a shield. "Do not fear me," she called, her voice steady, carrying across the clearing. "I am here to help you." For a long moment, silence reigned. Then slowly the wolves' growls softened, their bodies relaxing as they felt the truth of her words and the power she wielded. Alara stepped further into the clearing, feeling the energy flow through her, connecting her to each wolf, to the forest, to the land itself. Kaelin stood behind her, watching with pride and careful caution. He knew the darkness they faced was cunning, powerful, and patient. The curse that had once twisted her pack could return at any moment, and this time it would be stronger. Alara knelt beside an elder wolf, its breathing shallow, eyes clouded with fear. She reached out, placing her hand on its fur, and whispered the words of the ancient magic she had learned. Energy pulsed from her, bright and warm, filling the forest with light. The elder's eyes cleared, and it lifted its head, nuzzling her gently. Tears pricked Alara's eyes. She had not expected gratitude, not from them. She had only hoped for survival. Yet here, in this moment, she felt something she had never felt before, acceptance. Not just for what she could do, but for who she was. The shadows stirred suddenly, and a cold wind swept through the trees. Alara stiffened. The curse had returned, not fully formed, but strong enough to test her limits. Dark shapes moved in the edges of her vision, twisting and growling, feeding on fear and doubt. Kaelin moved to her side, his sword drawn, eyes scanning for the source. "Do not falter," he commanded. "Trust yourself." Alara closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She could feel the power within her, the pulse of energy connecting her to the forest, to the wolves, and to Kaelin. She would not run, she would not hide. She would face this, and she would protect those who could not protect themselves. The shadows lunged, dark forms twisting and snarling, but Alara was ready. She raised her hands, channeling the energy she had learned to control. Light flowed from her, bright and sharp, cutting through the darkness. The shadows shrieked and recoiled, unable to stand against her will and strength. Kaelin fought beside her, every movement precise and commanding, protecting her when the darkness attempted to strike from behind. Together they moved as one, a force of courage, strength, and trust. Alara could feel his presence, steady and strong, guiding her when her own confidence wavered. Hours passed in a blur of battle, energy, and determination. The shadows were relentless, but Alara did not falter. She drew on every lesson Kaelin had taught her, every moment of fear she had overcome, and every ounce of courage that had grown within her. Slowly, the darkness began to dissipate, retreating to the edges of the forest, leaving the clearing bathed in light. When the last shadow vanished, silence returned. The wolves, once terrified, now stood still, their eyes clear and trustful. Alara sank to her knees, exhausted but triumphant. She had faced her past, her fears, and the curse that had haunted her pack, and she had emerged victorious. Kaelin knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You have done it," he said quietly, his golden eyes warm. "You have faced the darkness, and you have not only survived, you have grown stronger than I imagined." Alara looked up at him, her breath heavy, her heart racing. I did it," she whispered, almost afraid to believe it. Kaelin smiled, a rare, genuine smile that made her chest ache with warmth. "Yes, you did it. You are no longer the girl who hid in the shadows. You are something greater now, strong, brave, and capable. And you have done it not alone, but with compassion, courage, and heart." Tears pricked her eyes. She had never expected praise, never expected recognition. And yet here it was, not from strangers, not from her pack, but from someone who had seen her truly, Kaelin. For a long moment they simply sat together, the snow falling gently around them, the wolves calm and trusting at their sides. Alara felt a sense of peace she had never known. She had faced fear, rejection, and darkness, and had found not only strength but belonging. Kaelin's voice broke the silence. "You have a choice now," he said. "You may return to your pack, lead them, and protect them. Or you may stay with me, continue to learn, continue to grow, and help guide the kingdom as it faces challenges still to come." Alara considered his words, her heart torn between the past she had once fled and the future that stretched before her. She thought of the wolves she had healed, of the trust she had earned, and of the bond she had formed with Kaelin. Finally she stood, her breath forming mist in the cold air. "I will not abandon them," she said firmly. "They are part of my past, yes, but they are also part of my future. I will protect them just as I have learned to protect myself." Kaelin nodded, pride and respect shining in his eyes. "Then we will face the future together," he said. "Not as master and student, but as allies, as equals, as those who understand the weight of responsibility and the courage it takes to wield power wisely." Alara felt a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time, she did not feel fear or doubt. She felt purpose, belonging, and a connection that went deeper than she had ever known. Kaelin's presence beside her was not a shadow over her life, but a steady light guiding her forward. As they returned to the fortress, the snow falling softly around them, Alara realized that her journey had transformed her. The girl who had been shunned, who had hid in terror, had grown into someone who could face darkness, protect the vulnerable, and embrace her power without fear. And Kaelin, the Alpha King who had first appeared as a figure of fear and command, had become her partner in courage, her anchor in uncertainty, and the one who had shown her the possibility of trust and hope. The kingdom was not yet free of danger, nor was the path ahead simple. Shadows still lingered and challenges would come. But for the first time, Alara knew she was ready. She had faced her past, embraced her power, and discovered the strength of her heart. As the first light of dawn broke over the snowy mountains, painting the kingdom in hues of gold and silver, Alara stood at the fortress gates, looking out at the land she had saved and the path that lay ahead. Kaelin joined her, silent and strong, their hands brushing briefly, a small, unspoken promise of trust, partnership, and a bond forged through trials and courage. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying hope and the promise of new beginnings. Alara had found her place, not in hiding, not in fear, but in the strength of her heart and the power of her choices. And as the kingdom stirred awake beneath the winter sky, the tale of the girl once shunned and the Alpha King would be remembered not as a story of fear, but of courage, redemption, and the transformative power of trust and belonging.